to Revive Ministries Podcast. We are nearing the end of October. It's kind of wild. This year seems to be going faster and faster as we continue moving forward. This theme this month was "It's Okay to Fall." It was it was the first theme I had, and if I remember correctly, it was very punny. I remember noting that, but more it's about the ability to accept failure, the ability to confront accountability, and possibly grow and move forward. With all that said, they're just words, and it's much harder, I know, for all of us in different ways. Albert Einstein says it this way: life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. Sometimes it's not pretty. Sometimes we will struggle. But when it comes to falling, it's not the falling that's the issue. It's as many has said, it's the getting up. Um, I will be wrapping this month up. At times, scheduling issues or whatnot, I will step in and just share and add to what all my guests, who I appreciate being on for this month and other months. The idea is that the conversation continues. I want to share with those who are listening, those who are hearing this, watching this. If you are in crisis in the United States, the 988 number is now active, but I do encourage you, if you are in crisis, just call what resources is near you around the world, 988, 911, whatever you need. I do encourage those who are around the world to find what resources are available. Resources are different for each individual. And, just like with mental health, with even physical health, we begin to realize that it's unique to the individual. Albert Hubbard said, "There's no failure except no longer trying." A lot of this has been kind of traditionally the failure inspirational quote. But what does that really mean as we dissect the idea of it's okay to fall? Different perspective, it may not be as okay. The idea is that we're even addressing this is to point out that there is a concern to find that balance. And as I mentioned earlier from Albert Einstein, it's about keeping moving forward. It's not about the initial correctness. We're gonna make it's expected to make mistakes. It's what we do with them, how we see them, and how we move forward that matters. I think Harry S. Truman, in regards to even working in groups or even just being in family settings, this may be kind of, at least for me, being in the military, but also more just being in an environment where the working environment is positive. You've probably heard a good working environment. A lot of it denotes the idea that what Harry S. Truman says, it's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. Granted, it's not to say that we're undeserving. Maybe there's credit that's due, but a lot of times the fluff, a lot of times what kind of becomes a barrier is the should-haves. What should have happened to me? Why is this happening? And not to minimize or be coy about this topic, but more so to understand that it does create that barrier. I'm not discounting that what your situation is or what you've been through is, how you say, um, tragic or undeserving. But when we think about falling, and as I mentioned before, it's not so much resisting or avoiding each fall, it's how we respond to it. Now, granted, I'm sharing my perspective from my experience, my context, and others may find this as helpful or a little bit less due to the verbiage I'm using. But with that being said, we can all agree that sometimes when we're able to just focus on the task at hand, when we think about just being around a healthy environment where we're just working together to do something good or great, it's amazing what can be done. Um, part of those moments, and when we see things like that happen in life, it can provide inspiring stories, and the stories doesn't need to be in groups. And a lot of times it's our individual story that kind of sticks out and reminds us of where we've been. But it's also a way to communicate to the world, communicate to those around you, and communicate to yourself. One of the things that I keep reminding, or trying to remind myself, is how easy we forget. Um, how easy we forget how far we've come, or how easy we forget the lessons we may have learned. But stories has a interesting element that gives knowledge and lessons, but in a context that's meaningful and deeper. There's a word my wife has, untranslatable words. It's samar. It says staying up late long after the sun has gone down and having an enjoyable time with friends. We can imagine the stories that may come from this kind of word. Why it was even the word that was even made. It just shows the importance of this, being present, being around those who are important to you. Because we in ourselves are allowed, even though we may not understand or even can even feel or even can relate to what others have been through, there's this underlying thread of storytelling and how we share our stories that can be relatable. Some of the most relatable things, and you can see it in the music industry, is sad songs. Some of the best songs are sad, but even Jonathan Safran Foer said songs are as sad as a listener. It's interesting because perspective plays a big part on how we perceive the world, and in turn how we perceive our failures. I think David Goggin, and I've shared this before this month, is he's coined the most important conversation you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself. We have mentioned many of times in previous months that we are constantly rushed. Now, there's certain aspects in our life that may require an immediate response. But at the same time, when we're able to pause and reflect, sometimes we can have those conversations with ourselves. One of the most notable ones in the context of my faith, I used to ask myself, because I wasn't always faith-based, was why am I here? Why bother? Wouldn't it be easier to not? Now, that whole thing, unpacking that, it reminds me of why am I here? Well, for this illustration, my experience was I had nothing else to connect to, so that is why I'm here. Was it great? Did it something that inspired me? No. One thing I did was drawn to was the sound. I did like working with the sound equipment. I felt a part of something, but quite frankly, I didn't really connect well at first. Um, and then the second part of that kind of illustration, wouldn't it be easier to not? And I think initially it may be easier, but a lot of times looking back, it wouldn't. I think the problem the the problem that I mentioned in the beginning was I wasn't really connected to anything. So whether it was something I saw value at the immediate, not doing it wasn't adding anything either. So this conversation, even though I wasn't particularly fond of, or even it would made me be honest with myself. So sometimes um, I knew why I went to church. Was it something that um, would be received well from others? Probably not, but that's okay because that is my story. And because I was honest with myself and throughout my journey, I began to gain perspective. And the question why I did things became less and less scary. Why am I at church? Why do I do that? Especially when I was in different positions in church, when I was more involved in church, I started asking questions not only for myself but for others. Why do people come to church? And I'm using this as an illustration because not to proselytize or anything, but you can kind of see that these questions not just it doesn't there's no stopping. The question keeps coming, but it dives us deeper in why we do what we do. It amazes me. Um, if you look at the gym setting, you start working out, and a lot of times there's goals. What is your goal? You want to lose weight. Okay, and all this, but a lot of times I would say, I always say, and I think one good friend of pastor friend I know is always dive deeper. Don't just stay. Oh, I want to lose it. Is there something? Because there's gonna be days where you don't want to get up. There's gonna be days where it's gonna be hard. And the easy days when you kind of get high five your workout, you see the results. But many of us know that that's not always the case. So it is okay to fall. Allows that grace, that kind of stretching, that room to rediscover and have this conversation that David Goggin is kind of mentioning. And at the same time, it kind of, I had Albert Einstein quote before. There's another quote that I like to mention. No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. So the idea of, I use this illustration lately. You get some furniture and you bring it home, and says it shouldn't be hard to put together, but you find it hard to put together. 1 hour becomes 2 hours, 2 hours becomes 3 hours, 4 hours, and then 5 hours. Now, the thing is, most of us, at least from my experience, we want to complete it, and most of us will, unless there's something severely lacking in the material, or there's something that you cannot, there's some problem with the product itself. Most of us will try to complete it. But sometimes, in the Air Force, they used to say, work smarter, not harder. Sometimes you had to step away from it. Just for a moment. Even just 15 minutes, it sounds so small. I remember just would do wonders. I was working on aircraft when I was in the Air Force, and I'll be frustrated. I'm like right there, and I'm like, it's not working. In my mind, nothing could fix what I was trying to fix, which wasn't entirely true. It was just getting harder and harder to kind of stay composed, to kind of see things clearer. Albert Einstein's quote kind of makes me kind of consider that notion that sometimes we kind of have to step back and we may be able to find something that we don't see before. These are all kind of things that I've learned and some things that I've seen. But sometimes, unfortunately, when it comes to overcoming negative things in our lives, or we may struggle to remember things clearly, which is why I even brought up the whole stories. Which may prevent us from taking the steps out. We may hold on some arbitrary fact or something that was said in passing, or someone had told you that happened to someone else unrelated to you. So now you're going to make that what you're not going to do. I encourage all those who are listening, I encourage everyone to be their own advocate, their own thinker of what may be best for you. So what I mean by that is do your own research. The idea is, I feel one of the things that helped me is to think for myself. And part of that is making mistakes. So sometimes we get lost in the idea of correctness, where it's so important that I'm correct that I'm just going to follow someone who may be more correct or appear more correct. The problem with that is that you never get to practice or even kind of experience or feeling the accountability or kind of uncomfortability when you are putting yourself out there. When you do make a mistake at work and you don't point the finger at everyone else, but honestly try to learn from those mistakes. Try to be better today. When we realize this, and you guys kind of take the time, at least from my experience, kind of the fear sometimes kind of minimize. I know everyone's context, whether it's work or life, may be different, but I do encourage, at least, the very least, to reflect on your day. What hasn't worked? Don't take 5 hours busting your head on something without giving yourself an opportunity to breathe and step back and seeing what the situation may be. Because the problem when you kind of do this, even if you are able to fix that sofa or whatever it may be, it can be, we're only 24 hours a day, and part of those, something else will have to give, and it's not about, I need to get this done quickly, but learning from situations like that, and knowing that if you're going to invest a lot of time in one thing, that also means you're going to take away something from something else. Prioritize. But all this kind of leans to the idea of when you're able to reflect, when you're able to kind of learn from your stories and understand your weakness and strengths and have those conversations with yourself, there is a chance. And Julia Perlada says, it doesn't matter how strong and well prepared you are if you have no direction. Eventually, there's got to be, it is wise to have some sort of direction. Even if you're very effective, even if you're very good at that thing, eventually you're gonna have to make a choice of what your expectations are and what direction you may want to go, whether it's work, friendship, love life, family, whatever it may be. And not making the decision is also a decision in itself. So the idea is, a lot of times we can get stuck in the idea that, I've made mistakes. I don't want to ever make mistakes because those mistakes were horribly affected my family, my life, etc. I think sometimes we need to define what kind of mistakes and what mistakes we're talking about here. Some of the mistakes is just being able to get to the point where you're going to put yourself out there, try new things, and if they don't work out, adjust. It's easy to say that, but at the end of the day, you don't. At the end of the day, when it comes to being more well adjusted and adaptable to changes, because change is inevitable, the exposure to change, the exposure to being accountable and kind of working through these uncomfortable situations may lead to a direction. And at the same time, I do encourage each one of you who are listening, those who are watching, to find what works for you. Now, I'm sharing my story. A lot of the people who come here share their story. It is not absolute truth. It is just what worked for me, what I've seen personally. I'd encourage you, at the very least, to not relinquish your choice, your ability to choose. Choose to get up in the morning, choose to go to work, choose to show up. Don't relinquish that on the fear of not messing up. I encourage you to take steps to prioritize what's important to you, whatever that may be. Make actionable, measurable, reachable steps, and see about engaging in them and seeing what happens next. It's vastly unique, but it's led by you. When it comes to our stories, they're inspiring because we don't know what happens next. I still remember the Westerns, and some of the kind of themes are, a lot of them, maybe they know that the stacks are against them, but they feel, because of direction and then because of how they know their character, that despite the uncertainty, they're going to push forward. They don't shy away from the storm. They don't shy away from challenges. They expect them. And they know that despite each individual having different contexts and different situations that may not be as relatable to what I'm saying today, at the very least, take the time to have those conversations with yourself so you can better understand how to prioritize and how to step forward. And when you do fall, when you do make those mistakes, you have a better idea, better understanding what adjustments you may need to make. My final thoughts are really simple. It's just don't assume that there's only one way. Take time to figure out what may work, what may not work, but also put value in the idea that you have a choice today. You have a choice to go out for a walk or not. You have a choice to reinforce some negative thinking. You could hang on to the idea, if you follow these 10 steps, then you'll never get into trouble. Conditional that those 10 steps will stay the same, that nothing around those 10 steps will ever be affected, I feel that's more of a risk. Personally, I feel that we're not that we're running towards being reckless, but we understand that the change in life happens. We are in different stages in our lives. Our perspective, our goals, our values change. But at the very least, if you get anything from this episode, I encourage you not to relinquish your own value and in your own right to choose what may or may not be helpful for you. But at the end of the day, I feel when we actually slow down and take those times to have those conversations within ourselves, we may find something new, a new way of approaching. Stories, especially in this podcast, is a lot of times the cornerstone of what we try to do in this platform. We do not proselytize, but we do inspire hope. Whether my story spoke to you or someone else on the podcast, I do encourage each one of you to keep moving forward. It's not going to be these major monumental steps, whether you're in recovery, whether you just lost someone, whether you're grieving, whether you just got laid off. There is tangible kind of things that you can make steps, actionable steps, but also recognize and understand there's intangible ones, how you feel, how you emotionally feel, and finding those resources. Like I said in the beginning, know what resources around you, what works. Don't reinvent the wheel if it was positive before. Find the group, do what, have a hobby, see what hobbies may be helpful to you. And at the same time, I just want to say thank you for each one of you who are listening. Thank you for all the guests who have been on. And if you want to be a guest, and I don't do this normally, but I encourage you just to go to the website. It's www.reviveministriesfl.com. Shoot me an email. And the email should be on the website. I don't want to, but just shoot me an email and let me know if you want to come on the podcast, and share a little bit about your story. Now, the Revive Ministry has gone through a lot of changes in regards to, we have monthly themes, but the mission is the same. The mission is to continue the dialogue. I just want to say again, thank you. We're getting closer to November. I can't believe the holidays, and then we'll be in 2023. And Revive Ministry Podcast is excited for what's next. I do encourage you to kind of keep to contact us if you do want to be, but also I just want to tell you how much I appreciate each one who are listening and all those who have been on the show. Thank you. This has been a wonderful journey, and I plan to do this for a lot more. I plan to do this a lot more. I lost my train of thought, but really, I just really enjoy just hearing other people's stories and understanding that my story may not be that relatable, but I think the collective, we all, just like John Lennon said as a kid, we all just want to be happy. We just all want to, at the very basic level, we just want to be around people we care about. We want to be safe. We want to be healthy, especially after COVID. I do appreciate all those who have been hanging on and listening and just being a part of this kind of mission. And there's just leaving you with on that. We'll be entering November. I'll be building next month. We'll be building family. In light of Thanksgiving and the holidays. Holidays is a hard time, and I just want to say thank you again. This is goodbye from Revive Ministries Podcast. Leaving you this last quote. It's kind of like what I've been saying during this podcast, but from Thomas Lloyd Qualls. He says, every answer can be followed by another question. I encourage, at the very least, dive deeper.